Hey, welcome back to the channel. So I got a call from a colleague of mine the other day. She was calling on behalf of her clients, trying to figure out a situation that her clients were in. It has to do with development, has to do with Vancouver, and it's not a good scenario. In this week's video, I'm going to talk about that example of what can happen with development when density is being prioritized in a slowing market and how it can affect homeowners without them even knowing about it. And by the end of this video, you're going to have a good understanding of how the development model is shifting in Vancouver real estate and how that might impact you as a home buyer or a home seller. Real quick before we get started though, if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Hasan. I'm a real estate agent in the Vancouver area, and I make educational real estate content to help you on your real estate journey. When I'm not making videos like this, I'm helping people just like you buy and sell real estate across the Lower Mainland. So if that sounds interesting to you, you want to chat with me one-on-one, you can book me for a free call in the Calendly link below or on screen, and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future video. All right, so we're going to hop right into it. I get a call from a realtor colleague of mine. We've worked together several times over the years, and she calls me. She's kind of upset, and she's saying, look, my clients are in a really weird scenario right now. Can you help me try and figure this out? So she gets a call from her clients. They own they're a strata corporation. They own a small condo building in Vancouver. We'll just call it a small condo building in Vancouver. And recently they noticed a sign on the neighboring property, which is also, I believe, a multi-unit type of a property. I think it may even be an office space at this current time. But they see a sign on a development sign up front, and it's basically a proposal for a high-rise hotel right next to their site, to their low-rise condo building. So they called my colleague and they said, look, like what can we do about this? If this is to go ahead, literally right next to us, what is that going to mean for us in terms of our market values dropping, in terms of our visibility, our shadowing, how much sun are we going to get throughout the year? Not to mention, of course, the construction aspect of it. But they see this sign, and the reason this realtor called me is she said, look, why didn't we at least get a phone call from this developer saying, what will it take for us to purchase your property and turn this into a larger scope? And so I got the address, I dug into it, I was kind of digging into the numbers. And, one of the themes we've talked about on this channel is when it comes to development right now in the state of the market we're in, a lot of developers are trying to decrease their risk level. So if they're able to build at a certain scope, if they're able to build a very high density project, they may be looking at it and saying, let's scale down from that. Let's do something low rise. Let's do something smaller. Even those types of shifts are not extremely common in the market right now because of people kind of concerned about building condos for sale. We'll talk about that in a sec, but she's saying, why didn't this developer call us? And so I start running the numbers and I said, your property next to it, in a hot market, that would be very valuable to this developer because they could build at a larger scope. And in fact, this developer is applying for an exception to not have to include the neighboring property because, and I won't get too deep into the weeds, but you need a certain amount of frontage to build to certain heights. That's zoning all over the place. So in order to build a high rise, you would typically need my colleague's client's site to be able to do this hotel. But what the developer is saying is, look, we'll scale it down, we'll build lower so that we don't have to incorporate them, because adding in their property, it just increases the land cost so much. So in essence, this development proposal, this development sign out front has immediately devalued their properties, because anyone coming to go purchase any of these condo units, they're going to read the sign, they're seeing what's coming up next to it. If they were to sell individually right now, their properties have been devalued overnight. And there are several areas in Vancouver actually where there's kind of this push towards hotel developments. We're short hotel rooms. And so the city has basically said, look, we're going to be a bit more lenient on a case-by-case basis. We're going to look at hotels nearing these kind of residential type zones in order to have enough rooms to be able to support, our tourism sector and the shortage that we have for hotels. So this is not something that is just happening in this unique case. But again, in a hot market, people, if you're next to a development like that, you're looking at it and you're saying, wow, this is my chance to cash in. I'm going to do really well here. And developers are typically trying to assemble as much land as they can so they can create a master plan project where they can have multiple phases. But it's just like us as consumers with the economy the way it is right now. We're all looking at it and we're saying, how can we do more with less? And developers are doing the same thing. How can we do more with less? And that leads to the second aspect that I want to talk about when it comes to development and the development shifts that are happening, the focus on hotels like I talked about, and even mixed buildings, hotels with rental component. Predominantly, that was a downtown Vancouver thing, but we're seeing proposals right across Metro Vancouver into the Fraser Valley for these types of concepts. But secondly, the shift towards purpose-built rental towers from strata condos that you and I could buy and sell individual units of. And this purpose-built rental, it's going to continue to be a focus and a strong point for developers over the next several years. I was reading an article today, a report from PwC and the Urban Land Institute, very extensive outlook for 2026. Lots of details in it, great for nerds like me. Maybe not something you want to read, but I'll break down what was important is that one of the biggest opportunities they see is in the purpose-built rental sector. And so what's happening is not only do developers, they buy sites in order to build rentals, but a lot of projects are getting converted prior to construction into rentals. So developers were planning to do strata condos. They're looking at the market. They're saying, we got to back up. We need to, resubmit a development application because we want to switch this to purpose-built rentals. Why is this happening in a market where rents are falling? And I'll explain it to you. The financing terms are just so much better when you are building purpose-built rentals. So the CMHC has a financing program for rental, 5 units or more. And without getting too deep into it, it works off of a point system based on how energy efficient your building will be, the amount of affordable units you might have. But if you get the maximum amount of points as a developer, you basically only have to put 5% down on the entire project, and you can amortize the loan over 50 years. So if we just take a round number, say $100 million for the land and to do the entire project, if you maximize the points as a developer, you're putting $5 million down and you're amortizing the rest at lower rates for 50 years. Now, if you're to build a strata condo, you're putting $20 to $30 million down, and then you have to deal with this market where you have to try and sell those units. Now, also, when you're building, you're flipping it over to rental, the city gives you more density. You can build higher or more square footage. The government gives you incentives as well. There's lots of incentives pushing developers to build these rental units. And so you're seeing a huge shift of developers that may not have considered rental before, but all the things on paper, when you put it all together, it's one of the only project types that you can actually pencil that actually makes sense for a developer. And then later on, once you have leased up the building, once it's constructed, you have an asset that you can then sell to a pension fund or to a REIT and all these larger investors that are going to buy up property, which leads me to, what does this mean for you as a home buyer? So, strata condos, they're not putting shovels in the ground to build strata condos. And when I say strata condos, I mean the ones that you can buy individual units. They're not doing that right now. Pretty much everything that's being built is going to be rentals. It's going to end up in these purpose-built rental scenarios, and either it's going to be held by the developer, maybe not as likely, or it's going to be sold as an asset to one of these larger firms. And so they're going to start owning up larger swaths of real estate all across Metro Vancouver. So for you as a home buyer, right now we have lots of condos. We have, up to a year's worth of condos that are on the market, and I see further pain in that condo market. I think prices will continue to come down into next year, specifically kind of the higher priced units, not necessarily the entry level, but we have a lot of condo stock to move through, but there's not going to be a lot coming in the pipeline. And I think government incentives and the way that they are Build Canada Homes, it's all geared towards these lower cost, focusing on rental, putting roofs over people's heads. And so there's just not going to be as many as much quantity of condos for purchase. Now, I have to throw a caveat in here. I think over time, the value of owning real estate for a lot of people or for a segment of people is going to diminish. Because you're going to have all these rental projects, you're going to have all these rental units in so many different areas. You're going to have a chunk of population that says, do I really need more? Like, do I really need to generate wealth? Do I need to purchase real estate? Why don't I just rent here? Perhaps they're not thinking of future generations. They don't need to because no one's having kids anymore. So they're not really thinking like that. So I think the mindset surrounding home ownership ultimately is going to change. It's going to be deprioritized for a lot of people. But I think the people that continue to prioritize it and prioritize it more, they have an even greater opportunity over time to build wealth. So I'm going to continue to follow what happens with my colleague's scenario here. One thing, actually pretty important detail I forgot to mention, is when they emailed into the city to dispute and say, look, you shouldn't approve this hotel development right next to us, the city's response was very interesting. They responded back and they said, well, do you guys maybe want to sell? And I think this is a really, it's a microcosm of how the city is viewing things now, because they're in a weird situation where they know we are short hotels, we're short hotel rooms. They've clearly been told they need to prioritize hotel development. They typically would not want to approve a development that doesn't have the right size frontage for a hotel, but they're probably feeling up against it and thinking, this is what the city needs. So it's interesting that they come out and just say, do you want to sell? Because they realize that the hotel is something that has to happen for the city. So it's actually not a very good sign to get that sort of a response, because like I mentioned off the top, their properties have been devalued because of all of this. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this week's video and learned something. If you did, consider sharing the video with someone. They can also learn from it. And again, I'm happy to chat with you about real estate. If you want to book me for a call, you can, or you can just give me a call, send me a text. My info is down below in the description box, but I want to thank you so much for watching this week's video, and I look forward to seeing you next week.